Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about what I think is the long-range meta for Warzone in Season 5 after Season 5 Reloaded came out. There were some balancing changes done to the Krig and some other weapons, so I'm just going to kind of do a tier list almost in this video, and then at the end I'll give you recommended builds for what I think are the best guns in the game. And this is specifically for Verdansk. I'm going to do a second video where I talk about Rebirth because I love Rebirth, and I think Rebirth is actually getting pretty popular in the community, so I'm going to do a separate video for Rebirth because honestly, the guns that are good, I feel like it's almost a lot of them are the same, but at the same time, there's a lot of other things that can come into play in Rebirth that just don't happen in Verdansk. So we'll cover all of that, but today is just focusing on Verdansk, the long range meta. But yeah, let's get into it. As always, if you guys like the content, you like the website, drop us a sub, a like, and a comment. But let's jump into it, and we will start ranking these guns. All right, so I put everything in memes/niche. We're doing long range guns. Remember, long range guns. So like your main AR or main LMG, your primary weapon basically. So first up is AS-Val. AS-Val just doesn't have bullet velocity. It has great TTKs, but it just doesn't have bullet velocity, so you can't use it as a main AR. Or a main weapon. So I'm leaving it in memes. FR556 is okay. I'd put it between viable and don't play. It's actually okay. You put a high zoom optic on it, and the recoil is not as bad as it used to be. I don't know if it's changed or if people have just gotten used to burst guns, but I can kind of play it and do okay with it. I'm still going to put it in don't play because I think for most people it'll be a don't play. I'm going to put the Val at the end so I don't get confused. M60, don't play. There's literally no reason to use it. There's so many better options. It's so slow. Reload time's terrible. Movement speed's terrible. TTKs aren't any good. Recoil is uncontrollable because it bounces left and right so much. Modern Warfare AK-74, Modern Warfare AK-47. I would put in between viable and can compete. So just so you know, this is not just empty opinions. I've literally spent the last 2 days, all the time I've been playing, I've been using different guns, basically every gun, trying to understand this meta and give you guys the best recommendations I can. So I've literally tried almost all of these at this point in the last couple days, compared how they felt, compared recoil, visual recoil, TTKs, everything. I've been trying to figure it out for my own usage, not just for you guys. So these are my real thoughts, and they're not just from the numbers. This is from actually using the guns as well. The AK-47 has a lot of recoil to start with, but then it has very little after that. You can get a huge mag, good TTKs. It's not a bad gun. It's not a bad gun. M91, it's okay, but I'm going to say don't play just because there's other options that are better. So you can use the Bruen instead. You could use the PKM instead, both of which I think would be better options than the M91. M13 is going to go in can compete / off meta as well. Very low recoil gun, low damage for mag because it shoots so fast, but shooting fast is a good thing also because it reduces that visual recoil because the time between shots is so short that there's not like a huge amount of time for the visual recoil to happen. At least that's a trend I've noticed in Call of Duty. The faster the gun shoots, the less visual recoil it has in general. And the M13 has decent TTKs and it's very accurate, good ADS times. So I'm going to say it can compete and it's a little bit off meta. PKM, it's amazing TTKs. Hits like a truck, has really good recoil, but it's just so slow. The reload time is so bad that I'm going to put it in viable, but it's a very niche gun. It's actually really good if you do like FMJ Combat Scout, but that only really works if you're fighting around buildings. I found when I tried to run Combat Scout with FMJ, it just didn't work very well because a lot of my engagements were out in the open, and I just didn't get much benefit from running the gun like that. But if you're fighting in and around buildings, you use snapshots, Combat Scout, FMJ, PKM, that is disgustingly good. That might be its own video someday because it's silly. AK-47 Cold War can compete off meta. Again, it has a lot of recoil, so it's hard to control, but it's very good. It kills really fast. You can get used to the recoil, but it just has too much recoil to be a long range gun. And I've talked about this a million times in the past, but recoil is 100% king in Verdansk specifically because you have so many engagements that are like 100 meters or people peeking you in windows. You have to be able to hit those shots that are really precise. And that just comes down to recoil. So that's why I'm keeping the AK and can compete / off meta because it just doesn't work that well in Verdansk because engagements are so long you have to be able to hit all your shots. Stoner 63. Stoner, I think right now with the 4x optic, I'll show you guys after we get through this tier list the difference the 4x makes on the Stoner. Stoner's the best gun in the game right now for Verdansk, I think, as far as primaries go for Verdansk specifically. It has fantastic TTKs, and the 4x specifically changes the gun and makes it have like the 3x. It like screen wobbles around a bunch, The 4X, there's none of that. It's perfectly vertical. I'll show you guys that at the end of the video, like I said. RAM 7, I wanted to make work. It just isn't great for Verdansk, in my opinion. Again, because of recoil and because of accuracy. Those are the two main things you have to have in Verdansk, and it just doesn't really have that. I'd put it between these two. I love the RAM, and it does melt people. So if you're playing more aggressive and you're more up in people's faces, then I would say it is a can compete / off meta weapon. But if you're playing more passive, more longer range, not pushing people as much, then it's probably more just like a viable gun rather than a can compete kind of weapon. FAL is just really, really hard to use. Unless you're a cheater, the FAL I wouldn't use. I'll put it in viable. I think it's good, but it's really difficult to use. AN94, I actually did run the AN94. Like I said, I tried almost all these. I think I dropped like a 19 kill game with this in Verdansk yesterday. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's a really satisfying gun to use. I did notice that the bullets go a little bit left of the reticle, like quite a bit. So once you start correcting for that, it's actually kind of a beamer and it feels pretty good. I enjoyed it. I put it in the similar category to the M13 as far as how good it is. Maybe slightly worse, just because TTKs are a little bit worse if you don't always hit that hyperburst, which at range you're not going to always hit the hyperburst. Up close, you can hit the hyperburst, but at range you're not going to hit all those bullets. So kind of in between these two again. But I had so much fun using it. I'm going to put it in Can't Compete. Krig 6 is still meta even after the nerfs in Season 5 Reloaded. Again, accuracy is king, and the Krig literally feels like it has less recoil than it did before. Yes, they give it a third damage drop off, but built for maximum range, that drop off doesn't even come into effect until like 80, 85 meters, and it's not nearly as dramatic as the last drop off they added to the Kilo back in the day. So you remember they added that drop off to the Kilo just like they did to the Krig, and people immediately stopped using it. And that's because the last drop off on the Kilo is brutal. It drops down to like 18 damage per bullet, whereas the Krig stays up at like 23 or 24, and the fire rate's not that much different. So the Krig didn't get nearly as hard of a nerf as the Kilo did back in the day with that third drop off. So it's still meta for sure. The middle damage drop off didn't even get changed on the Krig. So from like 40 meters out to that 80 meters or whatever, approximately that range, the TTKs are the same, which is where most of your engagements are anyway. So it's definitely still meta. I think the Stoner's better, but the Krig is pretty close. And then the Bruen. Bruen's a little bit better than the PKM in my opinion, especially with that 60 round mag for general usage, but it's just slow and there's options like the Stoner and the Krig, and it's just those are so much better than the Bruen that I'm just gonna put Bruen in viable. I'm gonna do investigations into bullet penetration, but if the Bruen has the same bullet penetration as the PKM, even though they have different caliber ammunition, then the Bruen might be the best thing to use for Combat Scout because you can get that 60 round mag. I'm gonna investigate that. That's another video that I'll do sometime soon. Oden. The Oden, again, it just has too much recoil. It hits so hard and it has a 100% neck shot multiplier, so it does the same to the neck as the head. It just has so much recoil. It's really, really hard to hit your shots at range. I'm going to put it in viable. Again, that's one I would kind of put between these two ranks, between this off meta and viable rank. I think the Oden's pretty good, but just compared to some of the other things, it's not really very good. AMAX. I tried the AMAX. It has decent TTKs, but the recoil is so bouncy. It's just not going to compete with the Krig or the Stoner. It's not even going to come close to competing with either of these two guns in the vast majority of cases, especially at longer ranges. So the Fin, I keep saying accuracy is king. The Fin, without the adverse barrels, in my opinion, is basically the most accurate gun in the game. Maybe the Krig takes over now. But the TTKs of the Fin are terrible and it has no headshot multiplier. So because of that, it's not going to go in meta. It's okay. The TTKs are just really bad. The Krig is going to beat it in TTKs because of the headshots, the effective TTK, because you're going to hit some headshots every now and then. I'm in between these two again. It's slow because it's an LMG. It's like, there's no reason to not just use the Krig. So I'm going to put it just in viable instead of can compete. M16. So the M16 is actually decent now. With the recoil change in Season 5 Reloaded, it's still not very good. It's usable though. But that's really nice to see. Again, I would like a rank between these two. I'm kind of between these two with the M16. I think it's okay. I'll probably make a video on the M16 as well. But I'm gonna go viable, but not can compete, just because it still doesn't have the bullet velocity. It's so frustrating to me because If they would just give it less damage but better bullet velocity, it'd be a much more fun gun to use because you'd actually hit shots. When I'm trying to hit somebody at 100 meters with the M16 and they're running sideways and serpentining and stuff, I just can't do it because the bullet velocity is so low. So I'm just frustrated with them balancing it via bullet velocity. The Grau is very much like the M13. So I'm going to say the same thing I said about the M13. It's very accurate, has better damage per mag than the M13, has almost identical TTKs to the M13, slightly worse ADS times, but it's very much like the M13. It's pretty good right now, but it's just not meta. It's pretty good. Scar has good TTKs, but it has that tiny mag and lots of recoil. Between don't play and viable, I mean, it's okay. It's not great, but because it has good TTKs, I'll put it in viable. Kilo. For Verdansk, the Kilo is just that last drop off. I think it's like 80 meters, 85 meters where that last drop off kicks in when you have it built for max range. If it didn't have that, it would still be meta, but with that last drop off, it's just not very good anymore, and that's unfortunate. I think they nerfed it a little too hard with that last drop off, like somewhere between the Krig, where the Krig is, and where the Kilo is, I think is where they should both be in terms of that last drop off, since they both have such little recoil. So it's gonna go inviable just because the Krig's so much better. FARA 83. FARA, I'm gonna say, is between meta and can compete off meta. Just so we have more in meta, I'm gonna give it meta. It is a very good gun. It's just the recoil is hard to control, especially at range. It has a lot of recoil. It's very, very low visual recoil, but it has a lot of actual recoil, so it can be hard to hit your shots at range. But it has great TTKs, and that's great TTKs and very low visual recoil makes it really, really nice. So I'm gonna say meta. It's one of the best guns in the game right now, definitely. But again, accuracy is king, which is why Stoner and Krig I still say would be quite a bit better than the FARA on Verdansk. FFAR, it's unplayable for range. I've tried. It has great TTKs, and it's just you can't hit your shots at range. So this is a primaries guide, primaries tier list. So you're gonna be pairing this with an SMG. FFAR is just not good for that. So I'm gonna give it don't play. MG34 again, fantastic TTKs, but it's not accurate and terrible reload time, terrible mobility. There's just much better options out there. S87, a lot of recoil, but it hits pretty hard. Has a ton of damage per mag. Pretty good gun. I'll give it viable. It's kind of close to can compete, but I think like the Grau and the M13 are both ahead of it in terms of how viable they are. So we're gonna put S87 in the viable category. Holger is basically a slower to kill Kilo, and you can't get the bullet velocity you need with it. So I'm gonna say viable, but it doesn't have that last drop off that the Kilo has, so that's really nice. So it does kill a lot faster than the Kilo at range and has very, very easy recoil. I would say this one's bordering between don't play and viable just because it's, I don't know, it has good recoil, but you just can't get the bullet velocity. So I'm actually going to put it in don't play. I think you should just use something else probably. M4. M4 is going to go can compete off meta again. It's very much like the M13, the Ram, and the Grau. Again, they're all similar weapons, so that makes sense. But it has much more horizontal bounce, much more visual recoil than the M13 or the Grau, and even more than the Ram 7. But the recoil is easier to control. The actual recoil is easier to control than the Ram 7, so that's why it's going to go there. Groza, for a primary, Groza's not great right now. I'll give it viable. They've made the recoil a lot easier to control, but it's still not made for that. Obviously, they just reduced the sprint to fire time in the Season 5 Reloaded patch for the Groza, so clearly they're trying to make it more of like a sniper support hybrid SMG AR, so that's obviously not going to be a great primary. RPD's viable. Has very, very easy to control recoil, but it just shoots marshmallows. It just has terrible TTKs. You want a combination of accuracy and decent TTK. Accuracy's king, but when there's things that have good TTKs like the Stoner that are basically as accurate as the RPD, it's not going to compete. XM4 for long range Verdansk, I would say this one borders between meta and can compete / off meta, but because the recoil is so hard to control for those first few bullets, and the first few bullets are going to be the most important, I'm going to put it in can compete / off meta, but I think it's very close to meta. Of all of these that I've put in this can compete / off meta, I think XM4 is the closest to meta. DMR, people say the DMR is back. I disagree. DMR, one of the things that made the DMR so good was the way the Axial 3X was back then. It had that sniper scope basically effect on all the guns, all the Cold War guns. That was before they changed it. So you can use the 4x now, but with the 4x and the task force to get that bullet velocity up, there's just so much visual recoil, and I just don't see it being a good main weapon still, even after the changes they made this patch. So I'm gonna say maybe viable, in between viable and don't play, in my opinion. I don't like it at all, but I also didn't like the DMR meta, so this is just personal opinion coming into there. So I think that ranks pretty much all of them. Let me go through this list real fast to make sure there's nothing in here missed. You can kind of use the EBR as a main, but really none of the SMGs can be used as mains. Type 63, I guess I can put on there. It's the same as the DMR. So I'll put it in viable, but it's not great. Cold War AUG, I would say is worse than the M16, and I ranked the M16 in viable. I don't think it's that much worse than the M16 though, so I'm still gonna put it in there. Let's see if there's anything else in here I missed. Dragunov kind of is a DMR, so I could kind of put that in there, but I don't really think so. Milano used to be able to be on this list, but now after the nerfs to the TTKs, I think there's just better options. It's still not terrible. I'll put it in there just for fun. I think it's viable. I don't think it's very good, but it's viable. It has those great movement speeds and stuff. It just doesn't have very good TTKs anymore. But yeah, that's my tier list. Now I'm going to go in and give you guys some recommended builds for the Stoner and show you that 4x versus 3x for the Stoner. Huge difference in visual recoil. And you get the benefit of having so much zoom. Zoom is underrated. You'll notice the guns in the past that were really popular from Cold War had a lot of reliance on having a ton of zoom. That axial 3x before it got changed was huge. For the M16, for the DMR, for the type, all those things used that 3x before it was nerfed, not nerfed, but changed down to where it should have been. So with the Stoner, any gun you can get away with using the 4x on, you should try. And the Stoner is one that you can. That zoom will really, really help you hit your shots at range. One thing that's not on this list that should be is the MG82. Because this is a primaries, long-range primaries video, we'll pretend that the Cold War crossbow is the MG82 because it's not here, so I can't even put it on here. MG82 is really good. I'll put it in can compete off meta. It's more of a mouse and key gun because it's easier to control that really, really high recoil on mouse and key. But it just can't hit those shots consistently at range, which is so important on Verdansk specifically. So on Verdansk, it can compete, but it's just not great because it just does not have that that good easy recoil that the Stoner, the Krig, and the FARA borderline has. I just noticed that the QBZ is also not on this list, so unless I'm missing it, I don't think it's down here. So we'll say that, let's say the Modern Warfare MP5 is a QBZ. I think it's meta. It's not as good as the Krig in my opinion. It doesn't have that third drop off, which is really nice, but the recoil is just not as non-existent as it is on the Krig. In my opinion, it is like perfectly vertical, which is really nice, but it has this weird effect where it kind of like pulls the whole gun down on your screen when you're shooting, and I just don't like that. The Ram 7 does something very similar actually that you can remove from the Ram with the Commando foregrip. I've made videos on that in the past, but you can't do that with the QBZ. But I do think it's still meta. I think it's almost as good as the Krig and probably a little bit better than the FARA. So I'll put the QBZ ahead of the FARA, but a little bit worse than the Krig still, I think, and definitely worse than the Stoner. I think the Stoner is the best gun. All right, let's quickly look at the difference between the 3x and the 4x on the Stoner. So the left side we have 3x, right side we have 4x. The rest of the build's exactly the same. First thing you'll notice just how much more zoom you get when you're playing on PC with affected at FOV setting. You get way more zoom, much easier to see a target at 100 meters, much easier to get your bullets on target at 100 meters. Obviously, I would change the reticle normally. I couldn't do it in this game because the game had already started though. So I've got this clip playing on loop, and you can see how the 3x, the screen kind of like torques a little bit at the first, like, first couple seconds of shooting, first second of shooting or so. It calms down after that, but those first bullets are so important that weird extra twisting is actually a pretty big deal in the Stoner. That's one of the reasons I didn't like it for so long. But if you look at the right side on the 4x, it has literally none of that. The recoil is just straight up. The camera just shakes straight up and down rather than torquing around, and it makes it way easier to hit your shots. It's just a dramatic effect that I don't know why it's there. It's not there on other guns. It's only there on the Stoner, but it's very good, and that's one of the reasons the Stoner is so good right now in this meta. All right, I'm gonna give recommended builds for all the meta guns, and then I will also maybe give some for some of the other guns as well. But starting off with the Stoner, I think this is just easily the best build for Verdansk right now. You get the agency suppressor for bullet velocity, damage range, recoil control, task force, same exact reasons. It slows the gun down, but we're using this at really long ranges, so that's really okay. Field agent for better recoil. The default mag on the Stoner's only 75 rounds. So the fact that we can get a 120 round mag with, it says reload quickness, but the actual reload change is like negligible. The times are up on the website if you want to see them, but it's literally basically negligible here. So you get an extra, 25, 45 rounds with no penalties to ADS times, no penalties to mobility, and the reload on the Stoner is actually not that bad. So really, this is a pretty solid option. I like the fast mag on the MG82 because it comes with a 100 round mag by default. So I like that a lot. I like to reload quick. That's one of the things I really like. But because this only has 75, I don't think the fast mag is really worth using. The Vandal speed loader is going to hurt your ADS time. So again, I pretty much with LMG specifically, I stick to one of these first 2 mags all the time pretty much. And the ability to get 45 rounds with no penalties at all is great. And then essential is the Royal and Cross 4X in my opinion. Some people use the 3X. I think the 4X is basically essential for this gun. And I like to change the reticle. I really like this reticle. I don't know what pack this came from, but this reticle is really good. And then obviously precision's really good. A lot of these ones, they changed these up recently and they're all pretty good. So it doesn't matter if you don't have the one that I use specifically. Just make sure you change off that default reticle. But this, I think, is the best long-range weapon in the game right now. Not talking about snipers, but just long-range primaries that you'd use with an SMG. I think this is the best long-range gun in the game. All right, and for the Krig, before the recent change where they added that third drop-off, a lot of the builds recommended using the Ranger barrel because it gives you the same bullet velocity as the last barrel, but it doesn't hurt your mobility and it doesn't hurt your ADS times. But now that there's that third drop-off, it really is important to extend your damage range out as far as possible. So I think now pretty much everyone should be using the mil-spec barrel. Unless you want a really quick ADSing Krig, then you can use the Ranger. But everything else here is the same. This is standard long-range build for pretty much all the Cold War guns. 3X is generally the most popular option with the Krig, but it does have such low recoil that you could get away with the 4X again. And like I said, zoom is really, really important. So you should try the 3X and the 4X. See which one you like more. I think they're both in a pretty good spot right now, but just the basic build. I'm not going to go over the QBZ build. QBZ, I have the same things to say about as what I just said about the Krig. So QBZ build is exactly the same as what I just said for the Krig. But for the FARA, there are some nuances. So again, the FARA has more recoil than the other guns for sure that I put in meta. So I like to do everything I can to reduce that recoil. So the last barrel for sure for horizontal and vertical recoil, Grau suppressor for extra recoil, Spetsnaz grip, extra recoil control. And then Axial Arms 3X. This is a gun I don't think you can get away with the 4X on, in my opinion. It's just, it feels out of control compared to the 3X, and 3X already is kind of hard to control. So I would stick with the 3X on the FARA. It's pretty good. It melts really fast, but it's just, for me, it's not super consistent at range. It feels really good on Rebirth. It feels really good inside like 85 meters, but a lot of engagements will happen outside that on Verdansk, and you just need to be able to beam people on head glitches and things, specifically in Verdansk. So stick with the 3X for the FARA. So I'm going to quickly talk about the Modern Warfare guns that made it into almost meta, but not quite. M13, Kilo, the M4, Ram 7, all of those guns you build very, very similar. So I only need to go over it once, but here we have monolithic, longest barrel, commando foregrip, 60 round mag, and then VLK. That's the standard. I do think in today's Warzone environment, it really, really does go a long way to have extra zoom. And all of these guns, I think, are borderline low enough recoil that you can get away with using Scout Combat. I say Scout Combat specifically because it's a 3.25x. You want the minimum recoil above that affected ADS threshold, which is 3.25x. So that's why I recommend Scout Combat. Integral Hybrid also is 3.25x, but it gives you slower ADS times by a pretty dramatic amount. So I pretty much stick with the Scout Combat. I use this a bunch. I changed the reticle up to T-pose, and I tried this on the M4, the Ram, the M13. I was actually frying with it, to be honest. It works pretty well. For the Ram, I want to make one specific change for the Ram. That's the build for most of the guns in general. Let's go to the Ram. So with the Ram, you do the same thing, longest barrel. Normally you use commando. We'll do VLK and then 50 round mag. So one thing I was actually really enjoying using on the Ram specifically was changing out this commando for an operator foregrip. This gives you really good recoil control, and I made a video on recoil control a long time ago. In Modern Warfare, when you have recoil control, it's the same thing as vertical recoil and horizontal recoil on the Cold War guns. So it takes the whole pattern and shrinks it in all dimensions the same amount. Whereas in Cold War guns, horizontal literally shrinks the pattern horizontally, and vertical literally shrinks the pattern vertically. So Recoil stabilization is something that we don't even have on Cold War guns, but you can see it's on the Commando foregrip as well as the muzzle brake on Modern Warfare guns. Recoil stabilization basically makes the gun bounce less horizontally as it goes up its predetermined line. So we don't even have that on Cold War guns, or at least it's not listed. It's probably there. We just don't know which attachments really have it. Most likely it's just the recoil attachments anyway. But with the RAM, I would say with the operator foregrip, it's actually similar in horizontal bounce to the M4A1. So you can get away with using an operator instead of a commando, and that gives you dramatically better movement speeds. Because the commando just kills your movement speeds, and this might make it a little bit better for some people at range. I would say just try the commando, try the operator, see which one you like more. But I was beaming people with this thing yesterday, so I had a lot of fun with it. I don't think it's quite meta, but it's pretty close. All right, guys. Well, that is my opinion on the current state of the meta. I think it's in a decent spot. We got a lot of guns that are close to viable. I'd really like to see the commando foregrip not kill your movement as much. That would bring a lot of the Modern Warfare guns into the conversation more than they are now. I think they could balance it pretty easily, but I'm not sure that they want to be honest. It's kind of fun to have a specific meta that you have to try to compete with other guns and things. If everything was exactly the same, in my opinion, that'd be boring. Like if everything was perfectly balanced, that'd be boring. And I think they do that on purpose. I think they have certain guns that they're trying to make better, and they rotate them out. Like we've never had a stoner meta really before. We've had guns that could compete with it, but I do think it's the best right now. So I'm fine with it. It's fun. I think it's unique to try to find things that can compete with the meta that aren't meta. That's what I'm obsessed with. Obviously, that's why I started TGD. But I hope you guys found this video interesting and useful. I will probably be coming out with another video tomorrow, maybe another video tonight. We'll see. I've got a ton of ideas for videos right now, so we have a lot of content coming. As always, if you like the content, drop us that sub, like, and comment. But I will see you guys all in the next one, and have a great day.